Today's episode of Wine and Dime is sponsored by Rooted Planning Group, a fee-only financial planning firm that believes life is about events, supported by your dollars and cents. And we want to help you achieve your goals. Hop on over to www.rootedpg.com to learn more about the services. Every week, it's my goal to share financial information that helps you in both your life and Financial Vineyard. We hope it takes you from your roots to the journey of your vines and the influences in the air that have helped craft your delicious life. Like wine, life and finances have different palates that should be celebrated and not judged. Hi, Wine and Dime listeners. Amy Irvine here, CEO and founder of Rooted Planning Group. This is part 2 of the sandwich generation conversation that I wanted to have with all of our listeners. But before we get into that, I wanted to mention one of the wineries, as many of you know from the last episode. And if you didn't, you'll want to go back and listen to part 1, where we talk about things that you should be thinking about if your parents are starting to show some care needs or some of your time for some care needs, some ideas that you might want to start exploring. But we headed down to Florida. My husband and I headed down to Florida for our annual voyage, I guess you want to say, for the winter. And on the way, we stopped at a cute little winery called Shelton Vineyards in Surrey, North Carolina. Spent a little bit of time in the winery tasting some various wines. They had quite an array of wines. So if you like whites, you like sweets, you like reds, you like rosés, there's going to be anything that you would want pretty much, I think, under the sun there. I did not try the port and I did not try many of the sweet wines, but the reds were hearty and hefty, and they did have a fun sparkling rosé. So if you're into that kind of thing, check out Shelton Vineyards in Surrey, North Carolina, just to see if there's something on the menu you might enjoy. We sure did. We walked away with about 3 bottles of wine. So we liked something, clearly. A couple of them were the sparkling rosés. In all seriousness, when we're talking about the idea of the sandwich generation, I mentioned in the last podcast that there's a number of things that you will want to be thinking about financially on your plate. Because often, people start, it's a slow progress, right? You start to have to take care of your parents more and more. I call it raising parents, if you recall. And, it just becomes this thing where you don't notice it a lot, but I suggested that you make a list and also to put together what I call the red file. Some of the tools that you might want to consider if your parents are needing more and more dependent care, first of all, and it's always this time of year, it gets a little bit hectic at Rooted Planning Group, but first of all, one of the main things that we want to be looking at is the healthcare plan that your parents are on. You can go to Office for the Aging. Usually there's somebody in the Office for the Aging that will help determine what plan is best. There's also great Medicare brokers that exist. We have a couple of organizations that we work very closely with to help clients find the right plan for them. There is no one plan fits all because it's based on the medications that you're on. It's based on the doctors that you see. It's based on the area. It's based on any particular chronic diagnostics that you have. So finding somebody to help you find the right insurance plan for your parents will be very helpful in the financial toll that it takes on them. Another thing that we have, especially as driving becomes more and more of an issue, is looking for transportation. So there's a couple ways that you can go about this. In some counties, there's actually public transportation that exists for people in an aging population. I know in Steuben County, there is Faith in Action is an organization that provides free transportation to people over the age of 65. But in other counties and other organizations or other states, there might be other organizations that can provide that kind of transportation. I would talk with your parents' physicians. They may know or be aware of some of that. Sometimes they offer a doctor, or not just doctor visits, but to the grocery store, or they might do well care visits. They might be, or check-in visits, or they might do phone visits, that sort of thing. So getting one of the biggest concerns that I always talk about with our clients when their parents are aging is the lack of interaction and community if they're in their own own home. If they're still living at home by themselves, do they still have a good community? One of the things that my husband and I saw with my mother-in-law as she aged was that her circle of friends was just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And she didn't have that sense of community anymore. And that can bring on some depression issues. So being aware of the circle of friends, being aware of their community involvement, and making sure that your parents don't stay locked up in their home unintentionally, of course, but that's certainly something to be aware of. Another item that you might want to consider is something called hiring a fiduciary, especially if you're not close in proximity to your parents. A fiduciary can pay the bills, can be a protectant against any kind of fraudulent activity. It can be somebody who, makes sure that care in some sense is being taken with their finances. And there are many organizations out there that can serve in that capacity as a fiduciary. And the type of fiduciary that I'm referring to is somebody that would actually pay the bills. So you don't have to take on that responsibility and that role as far as taking over that. So you can hire somebody to take that on. And of course, hiring the right kind of people to come in and do any of the work that might need to be done on the home is pretty important as well. But making sure that your parents don't get ripped off as part of that process is really important. And if you don't live close by, that might be something that you would want to consider. Another thing that I think is really important is also somehow figuring out a way to back up. Hopefully your parents have some sort of cell phone or emergency phone. They might have some pictures on the phone. You might want to consider either adding them to your plan and getting a backup of those pictures, or if they send you pictures, making sure that you keep them in a special file. That way you have access to those pictures. If anything ever comes up, or if there's ever any concern about anything, you would be able to access those pictures and have your in-laws or parents take pictures of the things around their home so that there's clear documentation of the items that they have. And if anything comes up missing, they're not dismissed in that particular situation, or if something should happen to them. And I think the other thing that I really want to make sure that people understand when they've got aging parents is that this is an ongoing process. Like, it's something that's really important for you to have conversations, as I mentioned in the last episode. In fact, there was just an article in Morningstar. The author wrote about why she is actually going to be doing a continuing care retirement community as she ages, mostly because she was actually helping her parents in her later years. She'd actually dropped her daughter off from school and was trying to help her mom relocate. And they were looking at different facilities and different places. And one of the things that she was most impressed with was that sense of community and the ability to have transportation all in one very nice location. One of the things that she mentioned in the article that I thought was really great, and we'll put this in the show notes so you have it, is that sometimes with certain continuing care retirement communities, you can actually get a return of your upfront commitment, because retirement, usually with continuing care retirement communities, there is some sort of upfront commitment that you have to make. You can get a portion of that back because you also pay rent along the way. So in some respects, that is a way to make sure that there is, good care given for your parents, because there is that community, somebody keeping an eye on them, and that initial investment that they put in there will ultimately, possibly end up coming back to the family at the end of the parent's life. So I think it depends when we're talking about this sort of thing, but I do think it's really important for you to start thinking about having these conversations, doing some tours, just like you do tours of college campuses, considering doing some tours of some of the wonderful communities that are actually out there, while you can still make the choice and you're not told, that there isn't an option involved. I know this was a short podcast. It's a deep subject, and I'm going to continue to explore this a bit more. more. But if you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to dig into any of these topics a little bit more. Again, thank you for listening to today's show. We hope you enjoyed it. We would love it if you would share it with your friends, express the ideas that you have, and rate us on iTunes so that we can be found by more people like you. A special shout out to TJ Meehan at Meehan Media. We sure appreciate all the faux pas fixes and blending that he does during the production stages. Thanks, everyone.
And that will about do it for today's episode of Wine and Dime. You can contact Amy through the website, www.rootedpg.com, or amy@rootedpg.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at rootedpg for the latest news. And if you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like to hear about, feel free to let us know. And don't forget to rate and subscribe the show wherever you get your podcasts. And again, thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next time.